Nvidia went from a gaming GPU company to a $2 trillion AI juggernaut almost overnight. Most people missed it. Now Wall Street is quietly pointing at another chip company and whispering the same thing. The stock is up over 60% in the last year. Analysts are throwing around price targets that sound almost delusional. And the reason comes down to one simple fact. You cannot run AI without this company's products. Not Nvidia, not Google, not anyone. The company is Micron Technology. And if you haven't heard that name yet, you're about to hear it everywhere. Let's set the scene, because context matters here. We are living through what is probably the most expensive infrastructure build-out in human history. AI data centers are being constructed at a pace that makes the internet boom of the late 90s look like a garage project. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, they have collectively committed over $300 billion to AI infrastructure in 2025 alone. That number is almost hard to process. Now, when most people think about what powers AI, they think about chips. Specifically, they think about Nvidia's GPUs. And that's fair. Nvidia deserves its moment. But here's the thing most casual observers miss. A GPU is only as powerful as the memory feeding it. It's like having a Formula One engine with a garden hose for a fuel line. The engine can do incredible things, but if the fuel can't flow fast enough, the whole system bottlenecks. That's where memory comes in. And that's where Micron lives. Micron Technology is an Idaho-based semiconductor company. They've been around since 1978. For most of their history, they were a boring, cyclical business. Memory prices go up, they make money. Memory prices go down, they lose money. Rinse and repeat for 4 decades. Analysts mostly ignored them unless there was a commodity supercycle to trade. But something changed. And that something is called HBM. High bandwidth memory. This is the technology that Wall Street believes could do for Micron what the data center GPU wave did for Nvidia. And once you understand what HBM actually is and why AI models are physically dependent on it, you'll understand why some analysts have Micron on a very short list of the most important companies of the next decade. So let's get into what's actually happening right now. Here's the core story. Modern AI models. We're talking about systems like GPT-4, Gemini, Claude. These aren't just running calculations. They are moving absolutely massive amounts of data around at speeds that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. Training a large language model requires shuffling hundreds of billions of parameters back and forth between compute units and memory, over and over again, millions of times per second. Standard memory chips, the kind that have been around for years, cannot keep up with this. They're too slow. The bandwidth just isn't there. HBM, high bandwidth memory, solves this problem. And the numbers are staggering. Where traditional DRAM might offer memory bandwidth of around 50 to 100 gigabytes per second, HBM3E, the latest generation, can deliver over 1.2 terabytes per second. That's roughly 10 times faster. In memory terms, that's the difference between a 2-lane country road and a 16-lane interstate. Now here's why Micron matters specifically. There are only 3 companies in the world that can manufacture HBM at scale: Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. That's it. 3 companies. For the entire planet. SK Hynix is currently the market leader. They were first to market with HBM3E, and they've been supplying Nvidia heavily. But Micron is closing the gap fast. They started shipping their own HBM3E chips in 2024, and Nvidia, along with other major AI hardware companies, are actively qualifying Micron as a second source supplier. Because when you're building $100 billion data centers, you do not want to be dependent on a single memory vendor. Micron's CEO Sanjay Mehrotra told investors that HBM revenue for Micron is expected to be several $billion in fiscal 2025, up from almost nothing the year before. That trajectory is what has Wall Street sitting up straight. But wait, there's more to this story than just the numbers. And this is the part most people completely miss. Let's go a little deeper, because the mechanics here are genuinely fascinating. HBM isn't just a faster version of regular memory. It's architecturally different in a way that changes how chips are designed and manufactured. With traditional memory, your GPU and your RAM are separate components on a circuit board. They talk to each other through what's called an interface, essentially a pathway. The wider and faster the interface, the more data can flow. But there are physical limits to how fast you can make that pathway when the components are sitting inches apart on a board. HBM solves this by stacking memory chips vertically, literally on top of each other, and then placing that stack directly next to or on top of the GPU die itself. This is called 2.5D or 3D packaging. The distance data has to travel drops from centimeters to micrometers. That's why the bandwidth numbers are so dramatically better. Here's the analogy. Imagine you're trying to pass water between two buildings using a hose that runs along the street. Now imagine instead you just knocked down the wall between the buildings and installed a pipeline that goes directly room to room. That's HBM. This architecture is not optional for next-generation AI chips. Nvidia's H100 already uses HBM3. The next-generation Blackwell chips use HBM3E. Future AI accelerators from Google, AMD, and custom silicon teams at Amazon and Microsoft are all designed around HBM. The entire roadmap of AI hardware for the next 5 years is built on the assumption that HBM exists and is available at scale. And here's where it gets interesting. HBM is not just difficult to manufacture, it's extremely difficult to manufacture at high yield. Stacking chips vertically and connecting them with thousands of microscopic through-silicon vias, that's an incredibly delicate process. Yield rates, meaning the percentage of chips that come out functional, are a massive competitive differentiator. Micron has historically been one of the most efficient DRAM manufacturers in the world. Their fabrication discipline and cost structure are genuinely class-leading. If they can apply that manufacturing efficiency to HBM production and hit the yield rates SK Hynix has achieved, they can compete on price and volume in a way that would genuinely shift market share. And the addressable market they're competing for is not small. Morgan Stanley estimates the HBM market could reach $30 billion annually by 2027. That's up from roughly $4 billion in 2023, a roughly 7x increase in 4 years. So what does all of this actually mean for you, for investors, for the broader industry? Let's talk about real consequences. This matters beyond the stock ticker. For investors, the Micron thesis is essentially this. You have a company with proprietary technology, a tiny competitive moat of just 3 players globally, and end demand that is structurally growing because of a technology transition that has decades left to run. The knock against Micron historically was always cyclicality. Memory is a commodity, prices crash, margins evaporate. But HBM is not a commodity. It's a differentiated, high-performance product with long-term contracts and pricing power. That changes the investment thesis, fundamentally. Several major Wall Street banks have price targets on Micron well above where it's currently trading. JP Morgan, Bank of America, and others have cited HBM as the reason they believe Micron's earnings power in 2026 and 2027 could surprise significantly to the upside. For developers and people building AI applications, this matters because memory constraints are real today. If you've ever worked with large models and hit memory limits, you already know this pain. As HBM capacity expands and becomes more available, the cost of running large AI workloads comes down. More powerful AI at lower cost means more products, more applications, more capability at the edge. For the broader tech industry, Micron's rise signals something important. The AI build-out is not just an Nvidia story, it's a full-stack story. Every layer of the hardware ecosystem, processors, memory, networking, power, cooling, every single layer has a winner emerging right now. And those winners are being selected by the same forces that selected Nvidia 3 years ago. The question worth asking yourself is, where else are there three-player oligopolies sitting directly in the path of a $100 billion infrastructure wave? That's the kind of question that leads to the next Nvidia before it happens, not after. Speaking of what comes next, let's talk about the timeline and what signals actually matter. Here's what to watch over the next 12 to 24 months. First, watch Micron's HBM market share numbers. If they go from roughly 10% today to 20 or 25%, that's a massive revenue shift, and it will show up in earnings calls before most analysts reprice the stock. Second, watch what Nvidia says about their supply chain. Any public comments from Jensen Huang about diversifying memory suppliers or qualifying new HBM sources are essentially a direct signal about Micron's position in the ecosystem. Third, watch the next generation of HBM. HBM4 is coming. The company that nails the transition to HBM4 first gains enormous leverage. Micron has been signaling they're investing heavily here, and their R&D spending reflects that priority. And finally, watch the geopolitical angle. Both Samsung and SK Hynix are South Korean companies. In a world where supply chain diversification is a national security priority for the United States, having a domestic HBM manufacturer at scale is not just good business, it's strategic. That could mean government contracts, CHIPS Act funding, and policy tailwinds that don't show up in any financial model today. Micron is not a guaranteed win. No stock is. The memory cycle could turn, competition could intensify, execution risk is real. But the setup here is genuinely compelling in a way that the Nvidia setup was genuinely compelling in 2020, before the world figured it out. The AI era needs memory. Lots of it. Fast. And there are only 3 companies on Earth who can provide it. Micron is one of them. And if you're a YouTube creator yourself, check out CPM Scout at cpmscout.com. It shows you exactly which topics pay the highest CPM so you can make smarter videos. Link in the description.